All right, I am recording. I think I finally got my setup right, or I'm getting better. If you see me looking over here, it's because I've changed where my lens is, and I feel like I've gotten it, the back, it's a little bit straighter than it has been in the past. I'm just not used to that, to looking over here yet, so I should be looking here now. This makes a little bit more sense. You would think after doing this for 2 years I got it right, but nah. Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and on this channel we review books. I'm gonna jump right in because it is 12:10 as I'm recording this PM, and I always record 4 videos in a row, and I eat a late lunch anyway, but I want to knock these out. Okay. I only record once a month because that's all I got time to do. So, as you can tell by the title, I gotta look over here. My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessah Moshfegh. I read this first in 2022. Yes, 2022, and reread it actually, I want to say in fall of 2023, finally getting around to doing the review on it, a re-review actually, or an enhanced, expanded review. Because I feel like I had missed something, and I did. I missed some things, and I'm glad I reread it. When I first read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which is my first Moshfegh, and still the only Moshfegh I've read, I gave it a 3 out of 5, and I'm going to go ahead on and say it. I reread it and enhanced and upped my review to a 4 out of 5. And something just clicked, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more towards the end. And I'm not going to really rehash my first review. That will be linked down below. I feel so weird looking in this corner. I'm going to link that down below so you can watch it, see what I picked up on the first time I read it, and then how I'm kind of expanding on that. This is why I reread books. This is why, even if I may think a book is just okay, or maybe I just didn't like the book, unless I really hated the book, I unhaul it. But I will keep books on my shelf that I thought upon the first read were just okay, because I may one day revisit that book and realize, I've changed my mind. Maybe I didn't change my mind. This is also why I annotate. I was able to go back and see what stuck out the first time and see what my process was the first time I read, and what I'm picking up one that I missed the second time around. So let's hop in, because I think that there's still some interesting things to be had, and this kind of made me a fan of Ottessah Moshfegh. I'm going to read Lapvana later. Actually, I'm going to read Lapvana soon, and I'm going to then check out the rest of her, I was going to say discography. No, the rest of her books. At the end of my hibernation, I'd wake up, I imagined, and see my past life as an inheritance. So in My Year of Rest and Relaxation, this is definitely one of those books that when it was released, very Instagrammable. It's definitely a trending book. It's definitely a popular book. It's still trending. It's still popular. It's one of those books that when you post it, it gets clicks. The cover is striking with this painting that was, when was this painting? 1798, but it's got this modern hot pink text on it. Very modern, bold lettering. It's Instagrammable. It looks good in photos. The content and the nature of the book, it's one of the, what is it, like sad girl fiction. But I think that there are still things that people miss when it comes to this book, and I hope that my revisit of this book and my enhanced review will kind of add to that conversation. So in this book in particular, we have an unnamed narrator who makes the decision to take a year off to hibernate. And that's, hibernate is in quotes, as a way to reset herself. She is currently, so this book is set in the in 2000, not just the early 2000s, but in 2000, New York City, pre-September 11. And in my first review, I discussed September 11 in that book. I'm not going to rehash that here. And so in order to hibernate, she heavily medicates herself and secludes herself, thanks to her horrible psychiatrist who just basically prescribes her whatever she wants and doesn't fact check or do background any checking about anything that this lady is claiming to get the pills that she wants. But she gets all of these medications to help put her to sleep. And throughout this year that's chronicling her attempts to hibernate, it's perforated with her memories of her parents, her troubled upbringing, her current toxic relationship that she has with her frenemy, Riva, and this guy that she has this really twisted relationship with named Trevor, who's just not a good guy. And so it's permeated with all of these things. There is a lot of foreshadowing to 9/11 again. That's covered in the first review. I rarely reread books so quickly. I usually like to take 3 to 4 years minimum before I pick up a book again. But in this book, I felt like I had missed something and it deserved a reread in order for me to do it justice. And I'm glad I gave it a second chance. But let's dive into the enhanced or the expanded themes I wanted to talk about. So the narrator, again, has set out to hibernate herself. The narrator has set out to reset herself through sleeping or as a way of being reborn. And I did discuss this in my first review, but I wanted to go deeper into why she chose sleep in particular. Because I have seen people call this book like, oh, this book is so privileged. Because this girl has everything. And I'm also going to describe this later. When you look at her at face value, she has everything. She has money. She's beautiful to look at. She has society's beauty standards. She lives in the best part of Manhattan that you could want, and she lives in a luxury apartment. Like she went to Columbia University. She wants for nothing from the outside in, but she's quite an empty individual. And what a luxury that she has the finances to take a year off to sleep, to recharge. But as much as some people, not we, I wish I could do this, but people say, oh, this is just privilege, right? But don't we all wish we could do that? The luxury to take a year off and to come back to ourselves, to cut out the noise and properly recharge. Many of us cannot do this, but we dream of doing it. And Ottessah Moshfegh gave us a fictional character that's able to do that. I'm sure there are people in real life who have the finances to do this, but man, I wish I could do that. Take a year off and recharge, to disconnect, and then connect when I connect back into society with fresher eyes when I'm ready. Life was fragile and fleeting, and one had to be cautious, sure, but I would risk death if it meant I could sleep all day and become a whole new person. So again, why hibernation? Why sleep? Why does she choose to sleep instead of taking a year off to, say, travel? So in my second read of this book, I feel that the why is clearer about why sleep. Sleep is literally regenerative and restorative for the human body. Without sleep, the body will start to fail, to shut down. If you're a person who has ever gone through long periods of time without proper sleep, perhaps you're a person who suffers from chronic insomnia, or perhaps you're a person who has gone through the short term, and by short term, I'm going to say more maybe acute insomnia that can maybe last for several months or several weeks, perhaps maybe even a few years when you're dealing with really, really stressful situations in life where you're just not properly sleeping because of life. Any type of insomnia is horrible. And with extreme lack of sleep, man, the havoc it wreaks on your body. Yeah, you feel like a zombie. And so with that in mind, the narrator is seeking to do the opposite. With extreme amounts of sleep, she is hoping to literally restore her mind, her emotions, and her body that have been broken down by life. In fact, it was the opposite of suicide. My hibernation was self-preservation. I thought it was going to save my life. I was plagued with misery, anxiety. I wished to escape the prison of my mind and body. I decided I would test myself to see what was left of my emotions, what kind of shape I was in after so much sleep. My hope was that I'd healed enough over half a year's hibernation, I'd become immune to painful memories. So enhanced off of this, why did she choose sleep? The narrator does have a very complicated relationship with her parents, especially her mother. Her mother. You know that at the beginning, very big, you can know from the blurb off the back of the book that she is orphaned. And both her parents have passed as of the start of this narrative, and they had been passed away for at least a few years. I think at least a few years. And both of her parents passed away when she was in university. And by the time that the story starts, she has a job. Well, she had a job. And so, but her relationship with her mother is especially tricky. And she describes her mother as being in bed a lot, lounging, smoking cigarettes, drinking, watching movies, watching television, and sleeping. And so, though her relationship with her mother is less than ideal, the narrator sees the bed and sleep as a way to connect to her mother. There is something here that she is also trying to restore, renew, and process, because you can tell that the narrator is hurt that she didn't have a better relationship with her parents, because especially her mother really was not a good parent at all. I'd always loved sleeping. It was one thing my mother and I had enjoyed doing together when I was a child. She was not the type to sit and watch me draw or read me books or play games or go on walks in the park or bake brownies. We got along best when we were asleep. So again, that's another reason why this narrator, who is unnamed, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned that, hair is poking me in my face, because she's still trying to process the relationship that she had with her parents. And now that her parents are gone, there is no hope for the future that this relationship could be restored. It's gone. What happened, happened. It didn't get fixed. So she's left with this weird dynamic that never got resolved. And so she's resorting to sleep also because it honed in on something that was at least a better memory that she had of her mother in particular. Also, with the decision to sleep, the narrator, and one could argue that Moshfegh, is critiquing how society says we should, what society dictates are acceptable and unacceptable methods to seek help and to help oneself. The narrator has come up with her own method that is outside of societal norms. It's outside of what the self-help and the wellness industry deem to be appropriate and acceptable, and that makes her a deviant. When really, these industries can be self-seeking, and they also profit from others' vulnerabilities. When really, are these industries really that helpful? I don't read self-help books. Not my thing. I'm not saying there aren't good ones out there. But I also pay no attention to the wellness industry. Yes, I take really good care of myself. I eat well. I move my body. I'm pretty fit. I'm stronger than I look. Don't get me wrong. I do invest in myself and in my health, but on my own terms. Reva, the narrator's friend in quotations, she goes with the societal norm. And the narrator, especially now in this state in which she is trying to get away from what society deems as appropriate and what's considered culturally acceptable, looks at Reva and like, this chick is just brainwashed. Reva was partial to self-help books and workshops that usually combined some new dieting technique skills under the guise of teaching young women how to live up to their full potential. And this segues nicely into this theme that pervades the novel, I think, the facades and social conformity. So the narrator lives in New York City, a city in which, like most major metropolises in anywhere in the world, think of like what are considered the biggest cities in the world, the cultural influences they have: LA, New York, Paris, London, Milan, etc., where there is this massive pressure to look the part. And to belong to this group, you look the part. Oh, I'm a true New Yorker. I'm a true Parisian, whatever. And that takes selling into something, someone could argue, especially those who may not have been born and raised in those cities. And so they have to, there's this pressure to assimilate to make you look like you belong. One wants to prove that they have what it takes to make it, especially in a city like New York that is cutthroat. However, the narrator realizes just how superficial and unfulfilling this ultimately is. And again, like I said earlier, from the outside looking in, this narrator looks the part. She is beautiful. She has the finances to be able to take a year off and sleep. She looks like she has it all together. She went to one of the top universities in the country, and yet she is empty. And in a lot of ways, she's hurting, and she's looking for something deeper. And no amount of money, no amount of partying, no amount of designer luxury goods, no amount of getting her hair done, getting her nails done, going to the spa, shaving, waxing, tweezing, being as pampered as possible and prim as possible is fixing that. A shot of vodka before I went out and walked past all the little bistros and cafes and shops I'd frequented when I was out there pretending to live a life. She was a slave to vanity and status, which was not unusual in a place like Manhattan, but I found her desperation, she's referring to Riva, especially irritating. It made it hard for me to respect her intelligence. She was so obsessed with brand name, conformity, fitting in. I thought that if I did normal things, held down a job, for example, I would starve off the part of me that hated everything. It was easy to let things come. It was easy to let things come and go nowhere. Being pretty only kept me trapped in a world that valued looks above all else. This is actually, we're going to kind of wrap this up, because this is what I kind of realized I wanted to expand upon when I was rereading this book. And one thing in particular that made me want to reread this book was because I came across a video on YouTube of Ottessah Moshfegh reading an excerpt of my year of rest and relaxation, and there was something about hearing her read her own work in her own voice that gave some of these passages a little bit more meaning. I could hear the author's intent I cannot speak today. I could hear the author's intent on how she was enunciating or pronouncing things. And that made me realize also how humorous this book actually is. This book is darkly funny. It is darkly funny. And she meant it to be a type of dark humor. And Ottessah Moshfegh is known for being dark, right? But hearing her read it added an extra layer of depth that for me I missed when I first read the book. And also, I feel like when I reread it in 2023, I read it at a better time to get the book better, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's not what you read, it's when you read it. Some books will never click with you, but 2023 was a strange year, not gonna lie. But even more so in 2020 than 2020, 2021, and 2022, 2023 was more of a year where I was like, man, how nice would it be to escape the world? And I don't mean that in a dark way, more in I've always, for years now, I've known how superficial society is. But just this realization more and more that there are alternate ways to do life. And how more and more I'm like, I don't really care about a lot of the things that people care about. I don't have a television. I'm not saying this, oh, I'm so edgy. No, I don't have a television. I don't keep up with what's current as far as like movies and TV shows because I don't care. And when I tell people I don't care, I get a weird look, right? Even more and more, I don't keep up with new releases of books because I don't care. And sometimes, not sometimes, more and more, I'm like, why are we stuck in this rat race, this hamster wheel? Why are we doing this? There are other ways to have a successful life. That is not what society says it should be. You can be successful and not make massive amounts of money. What does a person really need to be happy? These are questions that more and more I'm diving into. And more, I get annoyed when people blow things out of proportion and those things aren't even important. And, you know, I've always kind of felt at ends or at odds with mainstream culture, and I do so even more. I'm not saying that I've never ever participated in mainstream culture. I have, obviously. Look at these books. In some cases, yeah, but I'm not saying all of it's bad, but, you know, it's just this pausing and saying, why do we do and agree to and say that certain things are important if they're actually not important? They have nothing to do with the meaning of life. And, you know, things like, I get why people move out of more and more. I keep saying more and more, but I get why people move out of major cities and live quiet lives in nature. And that doesn't mean they're out here living like tree huggers. And not that being a tree hugger is a bad thing, but I get why people live quieter lives out in nature in more suburban areas or even in the countryside. I get why people downsize their living and say, what do I really need to be happy? It's really not that much. And I get why people want a simpler life because these are things I'm asking myself moving forward. Anyway, like I said, I gave this book a 4 out of 5. This book hit at the right time for me the second time I read it. So glad I read it. I'm looking forward to Latvana. I've heard that book is twisted. I've heard it's twisted. And I look forward to going more into Ottessah Moshfegh's catalog. Anyway, this review actually went on a little bit longer than I anticipated. But let me know what you guys think. And anything else you want to add about this book. Have you read it? Have you not read it? And what else? Oh yes, feel free to like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and follow me on Instagram should you so choose. I have really gone back or reduced what I post in my actual feed, my static feed. I only post about once a week now. It's been so refreshing to go from posting multiple times a week on my Instagram to posting once a week. It's so nice. Yeah, but I'm always typically posting in my stories at least daily. For sometimes I take a break. Depends on what life's lifing, but I like to post goofy things in Instagram stories that have nothing to do with books because I like to laugh, and I like to post goofy things on the internet that make me laugh even if they might be corny. But, you know, anyway, with that, I'm going to sign off. I've got other videos to record. Ciao.